Hey, why don't we go ahead and get started? So welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Experts. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grantsmanship courses. I have over 35 years of experience at NIH as an applicant, intramural researcher, staff writer, and now as a full-time NIH grant mentor. I've helped clients land over $500 million in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your NIH questions. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. So a reminder that if you are attending live, you're in listen-only mode. So feel free to type questions. You'll see in your toolbar that there's a Q&A box. You can go ahead and start typing questions in there anytime you like. And if you have something that you want to add to the conversation, you can put it in the chat box. You'll see that I've already put a couple of URLs in there for some sites that I'll be discussing today. So if you are watching this as a recording, just a disclaimer that things change quickly at NIH. Today is July 12th, 2023. So to the best of my own knowledge, everything that I'm saying is true today. But you should always check the NIH website and check with your program officer about policy changes because things move very quickly at NIH. So what you should be viewing in the library right now. So I would imagine, being that it's mid-July, that many of you are here because you're gearing up to write an application for the fall deadlines. So cycle 3 have deadlines in October and November. If you are gearing up to write an application for cycle 3, I would recommend watching the prep portion of your respective writing course. So for example, if you're writing an R01 or an R03 or an R34, watch part 1 of Master the R series, which is a 4-part writing course, and that would be on preparation, and that would walk you through things such as how to vet your idea in the reporter website and how to choose an appropriate standing study section and what to email a program officer. And once you set up a meeting with the program officer, the types of questions you might ask them, it kind of walks you through step by step the ways to optimize your funding opportunity announcement, your study section, your institute, get buy-in from the program officer, et cetera. And there's a checklist so that you can track your progress as you go along and make sure that you're doing what you need to be doing. So, so let's go ahead and talk about the tutorial today. So I am going to screen share, and I see that there's a question in the Q&A box. So we're going to do the tutorial first. And I had a couple of questions emailed to me as well. We'll definitely get to some of the questions in the Q&A box, so feel free to type questions in there. So let's start with the tutorial. Today we are going to talk about the R34 mechanism, which came up recently. So let's see, I think we want to do this one. Okay, so you guys should be seeing this NIH planning grant program R34. Hopefully you're all seeing that. So this is a question that came up in our last session where people were talking about, I forget what the question was exactly, but we got into a conversation about pathways to the R01. So it's almost never the right decision to jump right into an R01 application. Typically, you want to think about landing, an internal grant. Most places have campus funding, and then maybe do a foundation grant, then maybe a small format R like the R03 or R21, and then move up to the R01 so that you can demonstrate that you have the ability to write an effective application, land the money, turn that money into publications, and demonstrate that you're a good risk to reviewers at the R01 level. The problem comes in if you are somebody who's doing a clinical trial. So how in the world do you do a clinical trial on a smaller budget? So R03s are typically don't allow a clinical trial because the budget is too small. It's a 2-year award, typically capped at 200,000. So the R03 is not an appropriate small format mechanism for the clinical trial. Some R21s will allow you to do a small format clinical trial, but again, it's 2 years and it's typically capped at 275,000 indirects. And good luck to you if you can conduct any kind of even a small clinical trial in 275,000 indirects. So where does that leave you? That typically leaves you with the R34. So if you are somebody who eventually plans on proposing a full-scale clinical trial at the R01 level, your small format R is not going to be the R21 or the R03. More typically, it's going to be the R34, and it's specifically the R34 used as a clinical trial planning grant, which is the most typical way that an R34 is utilized. So I have the screen shot here that describes it. It's typically a 3-year award, and usually you see it somewhere capped at between 300, and I've seen it go up to 600,000 indirects. 450 is a pretty typical cap for the R34. This is the first of the 3 URLs that I've put in the chat box if people are wondering where to find this, or you could just do an internet search for NIH R34. How do you find an R34? That's usually one of the questions that I get, because typically they're sponsored by a given institute. So this is the second URL that you'll find in the chat box. I use this all the time. This is a really useful mechanism for finding active notice of funding opportunity announcements at NIH. So you can, here I've restricted it by, oh, it looks like it clicked itself off, I think, but let's come down here. You can restrict it by R34. And now we're down to 76 results, but that also includes no-Cs. So it's not as if there are 76 active FOAs in R34. And let's say you restrict it by institute. Let's say you restrict it by NCI. Now we're down to 14 records. And again, some of these are no-Cs, so this isn't an active NOFO. It's a group of NOFOs under an umbrella topic. But you'll see that there's still a fair number of them. So they're built around certain topics, as you can see. So skip over the no-Cs. So you have 1, 2, 3, oh, just 3 actually for NCI. So there are 3 topics under which NCI will entertain the R34 mechanism. So you would come in here and click R34 and then click off whichever institute might be the appropriate one for you. So the thing to know about the R34, it's a 12-page research strategy. It should be very, very much driven toward the deliverable. So you're going to talk a lot within your aims on the aims page, and also within the approach section of the research strategy about what the deliverables are, because by the end of the R34, when it's used as a clinical trial planning grant, preparing you to write a full-scale trial at the R01 level, you want to know that the information you get by the end of the R34 includes everything that you need to design the full-scale trial at the R01 level. So each aim should have a deliverable associated with it. And I see that somebody said the chat is disabled, so we can't see the URLs. So Isaac, can you help out with that? I'm seeing them as me to everyone, but maybe they just need to be repeated. Let me see if I repeat them, because sometimes if we don't have the chat, if we don't have the meeting started, they don't see it. Do people see the first one now? Okay, I see a thumbs up. So I'm just gonna put those in really quickly. That's the first one. There's the second one. And I haven't shown this third one yet, but I'm about to, because I'm like obsessed with this infographic that NIH just came out with, and it's relevant to a question that somebody just asked. Okay, so let's stop the screen share there. And let's go to our the questions that were emailed to me. Okay, so this is a person who is asking, what advice do you have regarding where to include the description of an intervention and other study arms for a clinical trial application? I most often see it in the methods section of the research strategy, but there I feel the reviewer is left reading pages and pages of background, innovation, et cetera, all the while wondering in the back of your mind, but what are they actually doing? Any suggestions about how to address this problem? So, oh, and now it's saying all 3 URLs are to the career path URL. It looks like all the links in the chat are the same. So Isaac, I'm going to ask you to please try to, hopefully you can see all of them for me. Let's see, and might be able to put them in there. Let's see if I can get any of the other ones in. Sorry, this is not my forte. Yeah, so I'll leave it to Isaac to do that. That third one is in there 3 times, and I apologize for that. So Isaac, if you could put the first 2, hopefully you can see them. I don't know if you can, but I'll make sure that those get in there before we finish. So the question of where to put the information about the design of a trial is very interesting, because in SF 424, it actually says that the details of your trial should go in the human subjects form. Okay, he's saying I can see but not post. I may put in the Q&A instead of the chat. That's fine. So in my experience, I have never once seen a reviewer complain that the trial information is in the wrong place, that you put it in the human subjects form, but you duplicated it in the research strategy, or you put it in the research strategy and they wanted it in the significance section, or vice versa. So usually I try to just tell the story in a way that seems logical to me as an outside reader. And often what I suggest in this situation is that a person have an overview figure that they include early on in the significance section, so that even if most of the details of the methods are in the human subjects form, and you really don't talk about the project design until you get into the approach section, reviewers will have some sort of overview to orient them as they're reading the significance section. So usually I have the person do a diagram where it either has the aims spelled out, or you can just see how the recruitment is going to take place and how many people are in each arm, the intervention arms and the control arms. And you can usually get that into a fairly small diagram and put that way at the beginning. I usually put it in the top right corner of the research strategy, so that reviewers at a glance can see exactly what the trial design is before they even start reading the significance section. That's my personal preference for how to do that one. Another emailed question I got was, I'd like to know what the best NIH grant mechanism is to apply would be for me. I just finished watching this lesson in your Master the R series, and it led to some questions. I have a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, a DVM degree, and was in practice for over 10 years before coming back to school residency 3 years ago. I applied for a K08, which is a mentored K award. That with the K23 are meant for people who are clinicians. I applied for a K08 in 2022 as a DVM and received good comments on my person and institution, but they didn't score my research strategy very high, and my whole application was triaged. I've now finished my PhD as of this summer and would be eligible for the K01 application. And I was curious if this would be better than applying for a K08 again, since it is my newer degree. I also am starting a faculty position in the fall, so I'm counting down on my tenure clock and want to apply for the best grant to fit my role. Thanks in advance. So this is a multi-part question, and I do want to do another screen share here of this infographic that I absolutely love. NIH just came out with this infographic here. So this is something that is a global, they've done this just for the K, but this is the first time that they've had this infographic for in a more global sense for different career stages, for including the R, the T, the P, et cetera. So this is a person who is here at the beginning of this purple stage. And so there are several parts to this question. So one is, if you're somebody who has both a clinical degree and a doctoral degree, which might be the case if you're like her, a DVM with a PhD, or like an MD PhD, or an RN PhD, or something like that, which is the appropriate K mechanism for you? Should you do the clinically oriented ones, which would be the K08 and K23, or should you go for one that is more appropriate for your PhD? And I would say it has less to do with which is the most recent degree and more to do with what you want to do with your research. Do you want to do something that's more clinically oriented? Because the K is really setting you up for the R01, and the R01 kind of defines the terms of your independent research career. So if you want to pursue a career that involves some sort of clinical element to your research, then you probably want to continue to look at the K08. If that's not the case, and you really want to do something that's much more of like a basic science kind of project, then you're open to do the K01 if that's what you want. So, and again, this is where this person is in this career stage. So it gives you an idea of some of the Ks that might be appropriate here. The other part of her question, she mentioned her, her tenure clock, and I kind of assume that she was talking about her ESI status as well. So she went back to school 3 years ago. So you know that I am really big on talking about how much ESI time you have left and whether or not you should pursue the K based on that as well. So one of the things that I would say is if you're looking at a 5-year K, then typically you want to have like at least 5 years left on your ESI clock, because it's going to take you 9 months to get a decision back on your first K submission. And even if it's funded on the first submission, you're not eligible to apply for an R01 until the end of year 3. So the years start to add up, and you start to use up your ESI clock chasing the K and then doing the K. And then all of a sudden, when you're finally eligible for a release in the percent effort to put in an R01 application, you find that you're at the end of your ESI clock. So that's the other consideration here, is how far into your ESI time are you? I generally say around 5 years is the cutoff. If you have like 5 years or more, go ahead and apply for a K. But if you start to get below that 5-year line, you may want to start looking into small format Rs, which would allow you to apply for an R01 sooner. Okay, so where are we with these URLs? Let me stop the share. Okay, so if you go into the Q&A, in the answered tab of the Q&A, you'll be able to see all 3 of those links. So they're now posted there. Okay, so let's move on to, and hopefully, Lonnie, I answered your question. There were several parts to your question, and hopefully I have answered them. But if not, feel free to add more information in the Q&A, and I'll look there. Okay, here are a few more questions. Just received a funding decision. Scores were pretty good, but was not funded. One main issue raised was that too many modifications were proposed, so we may not replicate our previous data. However, previous submissions to other agencies raise the question of novelty, and the modifications are necessary to adapt to the local population in the post-COVID world. It seems like there's no way to satisfy the reviewers. What do you suggest? So, okay. Well, first of all, you're talking about reviewers at two different places. That's number one. But that's not to say this is a complaint I hear even when somebody continues to apply to the exact same standing study section through the Center for Scientific Review. So I often hear, geez, there's no pleasing the reviewers. And that's often because you're getting different reviewers every time you submit. Certainly, if you're submitting to two different agencies, you're getting a completely different set of reviewers. And NIH is pretty conservative. So you're always going to want to propose a more conservative project at NIH than you might say, for example, we've had a guest on here several times from CDMRP, which is the Army portion of the DoD portfolio. And, she has said that they welcome novelty and innovation and think outside the box kind of projects. That is not the case at NIH. They are definitely next logical steps kind of agency. They're often criticized for that. So in this instance, you're saying you can't please the reviewers because reviewers at one agency want this and reviewers at another agency want that. If you want to continue to apply to two different agencies, you may have to adapt the application to those two different agencies and write a conservative version of the project for NIH and a more novel version for whatever the other agency is that you've applied to. And that's okay. You're allowed to do that. You can have the same or similar science at review at two different government agencies at the same time. And you could even shotgun it further by sending some portion of those projects, breaking off pieces, aims of these projects and sending them to foundations as well. But you have to tailor it to what they want. NIH tends to want something conservative, and clearly the other agency wants something more novel. So grant writing in general is an iterative process, particularly at NIH. Very statistically, very, very few applicants are funded on the first submission. And it takes some time and iterations to kind of approach something that will make reviewers happy, with the understanding that even going to the same institute and study section very quickly, you might not result in the same reviewers, and the new reviewers might want something different. So acquaint yourself with what your agency is looking for. NIH, pretty conservative. Your other place, less so. Foundations are often less conservative as well. Foundations are often not only tolerant of risk, but desirous of it. Many foundations will say that they are specifically looking to fund things that are kind of wacky, outside the box, things that NIH won't fund. So you got to know what the tolerance for novelty is at any given place, and pitch accordingly. So know your funder. That's just good general grantsmanship strategy. So hopefully I answered that question. I may have missed this. Can you clarify again where you would apply an R34? Is R34 for applicants already with a K award? You can apply for an R34 as a K applicant. The trick with the K is that if you're doing a 5-year K, you are not eligible, usually, unless you're like a surgeon. You are committing 75% effort on a mentored K for like a 5-year mentored K. And you are not eligible typically for a release in that 75% effort until the beginning of year 4. This is not true for like surgeons and invasive cardiology. There are some fields where that percent effort can be lower, but typically it's 75%. So if you're not eligible for a release in the percent effort until the beginning of year 4, often you can't apply for like an R01 or similar until the end of year 3. Some institutes have specific mechanisms like an R03 that only their K applicants are allowed to apply for, and those you can apply for earlier. I would ask your program officer if you are eligible to apply for an R34 earlier than year 4 of your 5-year K. But going back to your original question, who applies for an R34? An R34 is for somebody who eventually wants to propose a full-scale clinical trial at the R01 level and is looking for a small format R that would allow them to gather information that they need to inform the design of the full-scale trial at the R01 level. So it's typically used as a clinical trial planning grant when you don't have the time or the budget to do it in the R03 or R21 level. Okay, so a couple more in our last few minutes. How can I ensure that my grant application does not get assigned to a specific study section? Are there any strategies to tailor my application to align with a specific study section's focus? So this is a question I get asked a lot, how to avoid a certain study section. So hopefully you're requesting a study section using the assignment request form. So nowadays, in the current iteration of the assignment request form, you used to be able to make a negative request and say, please don't assign me to this place. So please assign me to this one, please don't assign me to that one. They did away with that in the last form set change, unfortunately. It's kind of like, damn, like, but the way around that is that there is a text box where it's like an open text where you can type in your justification for the request that you're making. So the trick here is to make your request and in that open text box say, this is the appropriate study section because of this, that, and the other thing. Please don't assign me to this other section. It's not appropriate because of blah, blah, blah. And you give your rationale there. That's how I've been advising people to get around the fact that you can no longer make a negative request for your study section. You can try other strategies. I've heard of people trying to alter the terms that are used on the Ames page and things like that. But typically, they're going to look first at the assignment request form. And if their automated processes are saying that you ought to go to some study section that you believe is not appropriate, I think the best way to beat that is to explain that in that open text field on the assignment request form. That's my 2 cents. I know that there are other people who use different strategies. I think this is probably the best way to do it. You can also talk to the program officer and you can talk to the SRO and see if that may help guide it in a specific direction. Okay, and we have like 2 more minutes, and I think we have, let's see, did that one, which R will be more suitable for an RCT with preliminary data and 5 publications generated, R61 versus R34? So I haven't done an R61 in a while, so off the top of my head, I'm not remembering the exact specifications of that. So I apologize, and I may have to punt this one to our next one so that I can do a little more reading on this. But if you have preliminary data and 5 publications, is there a reason you're not considering the R01? I think that would be my question. So if you have 5 publications among the team that's proposing this trial, why not go for the R01 level funding? Even if you feel like there are certain pieces of it that are still a little up in the air, you could propose a simple form. So this is the other thing I should say, and I know we often have a lot of people from academic medical centers and the basic scientists, just bear with me for a moment. But in general, if you're proposing your first R01 as a trialist, try to keep it the form of it as simple as possible. So single site or as few sites as possible. If you have to have more than one site, my God, you've got to justify why, and try to have it local, because it can be hard to orchestrate a project across geographically disparate places. And as a first-time R01 applicant, you don't want to have to sell reviewers on your ability to do that. So try to do a single site or maybe 2 sites that are very nearby geographically. And observational trial, rather than an interventional trial is usually going to be a better idea as a first-time R01 applicant. So the simpler you can make the design, the better. So I would say if you've got 5 publications in this field with this team on this topic, you've got a lot of preliminary data, and maybe you don't want to do either of these. Maybe you want to go straight into the R01. So that might be a question to discuss with your, with a different team though. Do you have any publications with the team with whom you're proposing? If not, then you are going to have some. Just in general, don't bother applying for an R01 if you haven't published with the team with which you're proposing. It's okay if you haven't published with every single solitary member of the team. Sometimes one or two people will be new to the PI. Maybe they've published with some other member of the team. But if you, of the PI, have not published with anybody on the team, then in general, at the R01 level, you definitely want to wait until you have that. But I'm going to kick the can down the road and say I'm going to do the R61 versus R34 question at the next AGE because we're out of time and I want to do a little more reading on R61. And yes, a few. So you do have a few publications with this team. I would talk to the program officer about whether or not you should go right into the R01 or not. So it may depend on how much preliminary data you have and if you have enough information to inform the design of the full-scale trial. But otherwise, I'll answer the R61 versus R34 question at the next session. So thank you all so much for attending. I really appreciate everybody supporting this format. We've been getting more and more people attending and more questions, and I really enjoy this format. There are still things that I didn't even get to that I wanted to talk about that we'll save for the next session. But I wish you all the very best in your grant writing. If you have questions you want to ask me, feel free to email them, meg@bouviergrant.com, and I'll answer those at the top of the half hour in the next session. So thank you all so much and good luck with your grant writing. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.